Hello and welcome to our fourth COVID-19 market update with Thomas Caldwell. Tom, today is May 27th, 2020, and it's been about a month since our last market update and just over 10 weeks since people started self-isolating and social distancing. There are many snowbirds in Canada who have properties in the United States and elsewhere, and they live there for 6 months of the year, and a lot are concerned about the US dollar versus Canadian dollar. What are your thoughts over the next 1 to 3 years?
Well, the Canadian dollar, in my opinion, is vulnerable to the downside, both on a short-term basis and on a long-term basis. On a short-term basis, it really is seen as a petrocurrency around the world. So goes the price of oil, so goes the Canadian dollar. The challenge in the energy area is clear in that you have pricing pressure, a market squabble going on, and a lot of anti-hydrocarbon pressure groups going on. So it's a terrible business. And that affects the Canadian dollar, short term. Longer term, Canada's a trading nation, and world trade is going to get way tougher than it's been. Globalism is no longer on the sheets. America is isolating. China is very, very hostile to Canada at the present time. This can be quite damaging, and particularly in Canada, where we have a lot of interprovincial trade barriers. We're not one country, and we don't seem to have the leadership required to pull us all together and have clear policies for the country and internationally. So we cannot be a house divided in a game that's going to be very, very difficult in the future. So short-term, long-term, I would say we're still vulnerable to the downside. I think the dollar's approximately 72 cents, but I could see it reaching 70 cents or maybe even breaching below that. I could be surprised on the other side, but my bias at the present time is to the downside.
So the markets seem to be unaffected by this pandemic. What are your thoughts on the markets going forward?
Well, there are lots of cross currents as far as equity markets goes. First off, stock markets are always looking 6 months to a year ahead. And remember, the market's not generally wrong. It's the sum total of maybe millions of people making investment decisions with their dollars. So they do some thinking about it. Also, they're looking forward, but the other thing is interest rates. Money is like water. It flows to where it can get its best return, commensurate with reasonable risk. What are you going to buy? Bonds? I mean, getting a fraction of 1% over several years, that does not make any sense. Real estate, commercial real estate is going to be quite vulnerable for a period of time, as indeed will residential rental real estate be. So where's your money going to go? Well, the best thing you can really do, I think, is where you're getting a reasonable return. Many of the dividends of major companies are safe, and even if they cut them somewhat, they're still good yields. So you can get a yield and hopefully some gains when we come out of this mess, 6 months, 1 year, whatever. But the market's looking ahead. So low interest rates coupled with an optimism for the future. And the future's going to look different, make no mistake. There's some companies that aren't going to make it. But an overall optimism that we can come out of this and move forward.
So lastly, I'd like to quickly touch upon community. It's important to support our local entrepreneurs, shopkeepers, and restaurants. What has your experience been throughout the pandemic so far?
Well, I have two sort of views in this. My wife is staying at our house in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and it's quite interesting. Some of the shops are open there. They're open on a controlled basis. I don't know if you can make much money at it, but what is interesting for us on a personal basis is almost all of the restaurants are providing takeout service. So it's really quite neat. We find if I'm taking my wife to dinner, well, we stay at home, but I call one of these restaurants, I pick up the dinner, a very nice dinner at the front door, and then we go home and have it in our home. And actually, that's kind of pleasant. It's actually sometimes nicer than being in the restaurant with people bustling about and worrying about service. So, maybe going forward, that might be one of the strings to the bows of restaurateurs, where you provide, even if you're a higher-end restaurant, providing a takeout environment. It may actually open a market. It might mean you don't use the same space, but it can open a market that higher end are providing takeout. So I think people adapt. The beauty of the free enterprise system is people come up with ideas. And, it's really quite interesting. The greatest period of business formation in North America certainly was the Great Depression, where people had to conjure up ideas to make money. One gentleman got scraps from a restaurant and boiled them, and that was the start of Dr. Ballard's pet foods, for example. So my point here is we in Western society have the opportunity to innovate, come up with ideas, change the way we do things, find a way to make a living. Some of the old ways will work, some of them will have to be tinkered with, and particularly, I just use that restaurant as one example. But there'll be lots of ways that people are thinking about this and trying to move forward in a positive way. And that's really the key thing. You have to watch the isolation at home. I've noticed my friends who are isolated at home, really isolated, they're getting very negative, very down, very depressed. I think we have to come out of this sooner than later.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time in watching this. Stay safe and healthy.